faith can be a good thing. It's something that guides you, lifts you up when you're down, and provides a sense of hope that carries you through the day. For many, it's the highlight of their existence, the driving force behind their actions. It's what helps them persevere, what keeps them focused, what offers them comfort in a sometimes chaotic world. But, as we know, faith can also be a dangerous thing. When faith is placed in the wrong hands, it can lead to disastrous consequences that alter lives forever. For many of us, ministers, deacons, and elders in the church are held in the highest regard. They're seen as the ones who have it all figured out, the moral compass of the community. They are entrusted with the well-being of their congregations, their families, and their followers. People look to them for advice, they lean on them in times of need, and they trust them with their deepest secrets and most vulnerable moments. But some of those who call themselves reverend or men of God, those who stand at the pulpit, leading others with words of faith and guidance, are not at all what they seem. Behind the titles, the robes, and the prayers, there can be a darkness, hidden beneath the surface. A darkness so deep, it can lead to unimaginable betrayal. And for those who place their trust in these figures, the consequences can be nothing short of devastating. Kari Baker was more than just a 31-year-old mother and wife. She was the heartbeat of her family, a woman who lived with a quiet strength that radiated from within. Her family and friends knew her as someone whose heart was always open to others, someone who would offer a kind word, a helping hand, or a listening ear without hesitation. In the small community of Hewitt, Texas, Kari was a pillar of support, not only for her family but for those around her. She was known for her compassion, her warmth, and an innate ability to make others feel like they mattered. Kari's life, to those who knew her, was filled with love. Love for her husband, her 3 daughters, and everyone she encountered. She wasn't just a wife or a mother. Kari was a friend, a confidant, a caretaker. Her relationships were founded on the genuine care she had for the people she loved. Kari wasn't someone who simply went through the motions of life. She invested in the happiness and well-being of others. Her strength wasn't always visible, but it was always there, quietly guiding her through the complexities of life. On the surface, Kari's world appeared ideal. She was married to Matt Baker, a Baptist minister respected within the community, and together they raised 3 beautiful daughters, Kensi, Cassidy, and Grace. Their family represented a perfect image, faith-driven, family-oriented, and loved by those who knew them. For a time, Kari's life seemed to be everything she could have wished for: a loving husband, a growing family, and a strong sense of purpose rooted in her faith and her role within the community. However, Kari's story didn't begin with the tragedy that would later claim her life. Her journey started with hope, dreams, and ambition, shaped by the very values that defined her character. It was during their time as students at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, that Kari met Matt. The connection was immediate. 2 young individuals, both deeply committed to their faith, who found common ground in their shared goals and values. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and within 3 months they were married. Kari's family home was the setting for their ceremony, surrounded by loved ones who celebrated the union of 2 people destined to share a life together. In the early years of their marriage, Kari and Matt seemed to embody the ideal Christian couple, dedicated to each other, to their faith, and to the world around them. Matt attended the George W. Truett Theological Seminary at Baylor University, where he studied to become a pastor. His ambition to serve his community and guide others through their faith was admirable, and it didn't take long before he became a minister at the local Baptist church in Hewitt. In many ways, he was seen as the perfect husband and father, a man whose faith seemed unwavering, a man who people trusted to lead them. Together, Kari and Matt built a life filled with joy and promise. They had 3 daughters, each one bringing new light into their home: Kensi, the oldest, Cassidy, the middle child, and Grace, their youngest. Kari poured herself into motherhood, dedicating her time and energy to raising her children with love, discipline, and care. She embraced the role of mother with all of her heart, shaping her daughters' lives with warmth, encouragement, and a sense of unconditional love. But the Baker family's story would take an unexpected turn, one that would change the trajectory of their lives forever. In 1998, when Cassidy was just a young girl, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. This devastating news marked the beginning of a painful chapter in the Baker family's life. The family was thrown into the uncertainty of medical treatments, hospital visits, and the emotional roller coaster of hoping for recovery. For a time, Cassidy responded well to her treatments, and the family dared to believe that there was hope for her survival. But life is often unpredictable, and in 1999, tragedy struck. Matt found Cassidy unresponsive in her bedroom, a moment no parent should ever have to face. The loss of their daughter was a blow that would shatter Kari, who had already poured everything into ensuring her children's happiness and well-being. The grief was unimaginable. Kari, heartbroken and in profound sorrow, sought counseling to navigate the pain of losing a child. It was in the aftermath of this loss that she began attending grief counseling, desperately trying to find a way to heal, to move forward for the sake of her surviving children. While Kari sought healing in the form of counseling, the impact of Cassidy's death never left her. It shaped her emotionally, creating a space in her heart that would never truly be filled again. However, her strength remained. She continued to pour herself into her family, refusing to let grief consume her. For Kari, the loss of her daughter wasn't the end. It was a turning point that would forever define her resolve to stay strong for her two remaining daughters, Kensi and Grace. But as the years went by, the cracks in Matt Baker's facade began to show. On the surface, he was everything that Kari and their community had hoped for: a devout husband, a loving father, and a respected spiritual leader. His work as a minister at the Baptist church in Hewitt was his calling, and to the congregation he was a guiding light, someone who stood at the pulpit, offering wisdom and spiritual guidance. He was trusted by many and held in high regard, not only for his role in the church but for his family life, which appeared as picture-perfect as could be. However, behind closed doors, the man Kari had entrusted her heart to began to reveal a darker side, one that was far removed from the image he projected to the world. The man she had loved, the man she had once placed all her faith in, was not the same person when the doors were closed. Over time, the truth of Matt's nature began to emerge, slowly at first, like small fractures in a glass that would eventually shatter. He had spent years hiding behind his role as a devoted minister, but the reality of his actions was far more troubling. As a minister, Matt was not just a preacher of the word, he was a confidant, a counselor, and a spiritual guide to many. He was seen as a man of moral high ground, one who was above reproach in the eyes of his congregation. But as the years went by, Kari began to notice subtle signs that something was amiss. Matt's emotional manipulation and infidelities were not as well hidden as he believed. What began as small cracks in their relationship eventually became an undeniable rupture. The life he had built with Kari, a life based on trust and love, was increasingly fragile. While the congregation saw him as a man chosen by God to guide them, Kari began to see the true extent of his betrayal. She had entrusted her heart, her hopes, and her dreams to Matt, but over time, the man who stood before her was no longer the person she had married. His actions, his affairs, his emotional manipulation, his hidden life, became impossible to ignore. The man she thought she knew, the man who had promised to love and cherish her, was now a stranger. In the beginning, Matt's actions were subtle, perhaps even justifiable in his mind. Flirtations, secretive behavior, and moments of distance from Kari became more frequent. But over time, these small, seemingly innocent actions escalated. Kari started to hear rumors within their community, whispers of his interactions with other women, accusations that he had crossed boundaries he should never have crossed. Matt's affairs were no longer a private matter between husband and wife. They had become something Kari could no longer ignore. His behavior began to change. The affectionate, loving husband Kari once knew became more distant and aloof. The emotional manipulation Matt had perfected over the years took its toll on Kari. She began to question herself, wondering if the distance between them was her fault, as Matt skillfully deflected blame and control, using guilt to pull her further into his web. The rumors circulating within the congregation were just the tip of the iceberg. It became clear to those around him that Matt was not the man he appeared to be. What started as subtle acts of infidelity evolved into a double life that not only threatened the integrity of his marriage but the very foundation of the trust he had built within his community. To Kari, the man she had fallen in love with, her partner, her confidant, was now a stranger. Her life, which had once been full of joy, faith, and hope, began to feel like a house of cards, each new revelation about Matt's behavior threatening to bring it all crashing down. The foundation of her marriage, built on love, faith, and shared dreams, was now crumbling piece by piece. As the years passed, the truth of Matt's actions became undeniable. He was no longer the faithful husband or the trustworthy leader of the church he appeared to be. Matt's secret affairs, often with women within the congregation, painted a different picture. A picture of a man who had lost his way, a man whose personal desires and self-interest had led him down a dark and destructive path. But no one could have foreseen the events that would unfold in the Baker household. The tragedy that would bring Kari's life to a shocking and devastating end seemed almost impossible, an event so twisted, so unnatural, that it was beyond the realm of ordinary expectation. On the night of April 8, 2006, a simple 911 call from Matt Baker would set into motion a series of events so tragic and complex that they would expose deep secrets, unravel a carefully maintained lie, and ultimately change the lives of everyone involved forever. At just after midnight, Matt Baker, his voice filled with urgency and panic, called emergency services. What began as an ordinary night of running an errand would quickly spiral into a nightmare. He told the 911 operator, almost in a rushed, frantic tone, that he had just returned home after stepping out to rent a movie and get some gas. On the surface, it seemed like an unremarkable errand, the sort of mundane task many of us perform without a second thought. But what he would find when he returned home would set the stage for the shocking events that would unfold. According to Matt's account, when he arrived at the house, he found the bedroom door locked and his wife, Kari, unresponsive inside. He knocked several times and called her name, but no answer came. Kari, a loving wife and mother, would never leave the door locked like that, especially in an emergency. As the story continued to unfold, Matt's description of his actions and the evidence left behind seemed more and more suspicious with every passing moment. Matt's story, as he told it to the 911 operator, was one of a concerned husband, trying desperately to save his wife. Unable to open the locked door, he claimed to have used a screwdriver to pry it open. When he entered, he said he found Kari lying on the bed, motionless, her arms outstretched, her body lifeless. Kari, a mother of 2 young daughters, Kensi and Grace, had always been the kind of woman who fought for her family, no matter the circumstances. To think that she would take her own life seemed so out of character for a woman who had always been the heart and soul of her home. Matt continued his recounting, stating that he immediately tried to revive Kari upon realizing she wasn't breathing. In his panic, he claimed that he had started dressing her, carefully pulling clothes over her body, while speaking to the 911 operator. As he continued explaining, he noted that he had attempted CPR, with one hand while keeping the phone trapped between his shoulder and ear. The operator, understandably concerned, instructed him to continue CPR until emergency medical services arrived. But despite Matt's efforts, Kari was pronounced dead at the scene. The emergency personnel were unsuccessful in reviving her. The life of a woman who had been so full of love, so devoted to her family, was suddenly and tragically taken away. In the initial aftermath, everything seemed to point toward a suicide, an unfortunate end for someone who had suffered unimaginable loss and heartache. When investigators arrived and began piecing together the evidence, Matt supplied them with the same account he had shared with the 911 operator. His version of events was consistent and seemed, on the surface, believable. Kari's body was found on the bed with a suicide note placed neatly beside her. The note, written in Kari's handwriting, read, "Mark, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. I just want to sleep for a while. Please forgive me. Tell Kensi and Grace that I love them very much. Please continue to be a great dad for our little girls. Love them every day for me. I'm sorry, I love you. Kari." To the investigators, to those who were first on the scene, it appeared to be a heart-wrenching note, written by a woman who had simply reached the breaking point after years of personal struggle. The words seemed to confirm that Kari had taken her own life, a tragic end to a woman who had already been through so much. Having lost her daughter Cassidy just a few years earlier, Kari had undoubtedly struggled with the pain of that loss. The note seemed to confirm the conclusion that she had simply been unable to cope any longer. But as Kari's parents, Jim and Linda Julin, learned of their daughter's death, a deep sense of disbelief began to take hold. They knew Kari, the woman who had dedicated herself to her family, the woman who had always been there for her children and loved ones, the woman who had fought fiercely through the unimaginable grief of losing a child. They could not reconcile this picture of Kari with the image they had of her. Jim and Linda knew that Kari had struggled deeply after Cassidy's death, but they also knew how incredibly strong Kari was. She had always been there for her surviving daughters, Kensi and Grace. She had always fought through adversity to ensure they had a stable and loving home. It was inconceivable to them that she would choose to end her life, especially when she still had so much to live for. In the days following Kari's death, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something about the scene just didn't add up. Even with the suicide note, even with the evidence pointing toward a tragic death by suicide, she began to wonder if something foul was at play. The picture Matt had painted, while seemingly plausible, felt too neat, too well constructed. Kari had been a fighter. She had been through so much, and yet she had always found a way to keep going. This wasn't the same woman who had always looked for a reason to live, no matter how dark things had gotten. As the initial shock began to settle and the reality of Kari's death sank in, something seemed terribly amiss to those who knew her best. At the scene, the officers and investigators, despite the suicide note and the tragic circumstances surrounding her death, still had no idea that a much darker and more complicated truth was waiting to be uncovered. Kari's parents, Jim and Linda Julin, were the first to express deep disbelief. They were informed of the tragedy just hours after the 911 call, their minds spinning as they processed the news of their daughter's sudden death. They rushed over to the Baker household, driven by a parent's instinct to understand, to see their daughter's body, to try and comprehend what had led to her untimely end. As they arrived at the scene, the reality of the situation began to set in. While they knew their daughter had struggled with grief after losing her daughter Cassidy, they couldn't fathom that she would take her own life. Kari was a fighter. They had witnessed her overcome tremendous emotional pain in the past. To them, it simply didn't add up that she would choose to end her life, leaving behind two young daughters who still needed her. Jim and Linda had witnessed Kari's strength firsthand. She had been resilient, even in the wake of the heart-wrenching loss of their granddaughter, Cassidy. Over the years, Kari had put every ounce of her being into raising her surviving children, Kensi and Grace, with love, care, and unwavering devotion. It was clear to Jim and Linda that their daughter would not abandon her family in such a way. But as the hours passed and the weight of the situation began to press on their hearts, Linda's instincts told her something was wrong. Deep down, she couldn't accept the idea that Kari would simply give up. Kari had never been one to back down from a challenge, and the idea of her taking her life left a hollow feeling that Linda couldn't shake. Linda's investigation, which began with a simple check of the phone records, quickly turned into a deep dive into a web of secrets, lies, and deceptions. What she discovered on those records would become a turning point, one that would set the course of the investigation on an entirely new trajectory. Matt Baker, the husband everyone knew as the grieving spouse, had been in constant contact with someone in the days leading up to Kari's death. Most would assume that a spouse's phone records are mundane, calls to and from work, family, and friends, nothing that could raise suspicion. But what Linda uncovered was anything but ordinary. She found that, during the week leading up to Kari's death, Matt had called one number 17 times a day without fail. In total, he had dialed this number 180 times over a span of just a few days. That kind of frequency isn't just casual. It's deliberate. Linda's first question was simple. Who was this number connected to? When she traced the number, she discovered that it belonged to Vanessa Bull, a woman from Matt's church congregation. At first glance, this seemed like nothing more than an innocent connection, perhaps a fellow church member, a casual acquaintance. But Linda wasn't convinced. The sheer volume of calls raised immediate red flags. Why would Matt, a minister and husband to Kari, be calling Vanessa so often, especially in the days leading up to his wife's sudden death? There was something off about Matt's behavior during those critical days. But it wasn't just the frequency of the calls that bothered her. It was what happened after Kari's death that truly raised her suspicions. Linda discovered that just after Kari had been found dead, Matt had given Kari's phone to Vanessa Bull. To anyone else, it might have seemed like an innocent act, maybe a way to help out a grieving family member or friend. Vanessa Bull, after all, was a member of the church and had been close to the family in some way. However, Linda was quick to see that this wasn't as simple as it appeared. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how strange it was for Matt to have handed over Kari's phone. A phone that contained the very records that were now beginning to reveal troubling patterns. Why, after Kari's death, would Matt so quickly pass off the phone that contained evidence of his actions? This wasn't just a casual exchange. Linda's gut told her that Matt was trying to cover his tracks. In a moment of desperation, he had given Vanessa the phone to remove any trace of his extensive contact with her in the days leading up to Kari's death. This was not just an innocent act of charity, it was an attempt to hide something, to destroy evidence before it could be used against him. Linda knew that this wasn't just a mistake, it was part of a larger pattern of manipulation. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Matt was hiding something, and it was more than just infidelity or a failed marriage. Determined to get to the bottom of what was happening, Linda reached out to Bill Johnson, a former assistant district attorney who had worked on high-profile cases before. With Bill's help, they began a deeper investigation into Matt's life, one that would uncover secrets Matt had worked hard to keep hidden. As the investigation continued, Linda and Bill discovered that Matt wasn't just a devoted minister. He had a history of manipulating those around him. Even before he married Kari, he had a troubling pattern of advances toward other women. This behavior wasn't new. It had started long before Kari's death. What they would soon find, though, was even more troubling. Matt had a long history of deceptive behavior, and Vanessa Bull was just one of many women who had been drawn into his web. Linda's discovery of the phone records wasn't just a key to unraveling Kari's death. It was the first step in uncovering Matt's dark history, one that involved far more than just a tragic marriage. It wasn't just about the phone records and the internet history, it was about Matt's character and the manipulations that he had used to control the people around him. His behavior wasn't just about infidelity, it was about a man who had the power to hide his actions behind a carefully crafted public image. The more Linda dug into his past, the clearer it became that Matt had mastered the art of deception, and that he had done so with methodical precision. But there was one piece of the puzzle that still needed to be put together: the autopsy. If Linda and Bill were going to convince the authorities that Kari's death was no suicide, they needed hard evidence. And with the phone records and Matt's suspect behavior, the final step of the investigation was becoming clear. They needed to push for an autopsy, and that's where the real fight would begin. The truth was within reach, but would they be able to force the system to acknowledge what they already knew? Kari's death wasn't a suicide. It was a carefully executed murder, and Matt Baker was the one who had orchestrated it. But would the system be ready to listen? The story of a mother overwhelmed by loss and despair was now looking more and more like a carefully orchestrated plan to cover up a dark and tragic crime. Frustrated with the lack of answers from the authorities, Linda reached out to Bill Johnson, a former assistant district attorney and seasoned investigator. Bill's reputation for unraveling difficult cases made him the perfect ally in this battle for justice. Together, along with U.S. Marshal Mike McNamara and Agent John Burnett, the team began to piece together what seemed like an impossible puzzle. Matt Baker's life, which had appeared perfect on the surface, was filled with dark secrets and manipulations, secrets that even those closest to him had failed to see. Linda's investigation uncovered something that shocked her to the core. Matt Baker wasn't just a man with a checkered past. He had a pattern of inappropriate behavior that stretched far beyond his marriage to Kari. His advances toward women weren't a recent development. They had been a part of his life since college. As a young man, Matt had been charming and charismatic, someone who could easily manipulate those around him. But as his relationship with Kari deepened, the pattern didn't stop. He continued to seek out other women, using his position as a minister to gain access to vulnerable congregants. Bill Johnson uncovered that Matt's behavior wasn't limited to one affair or a single mistake. It was a systematic effort to deceive and exploit, using his role as a spiritual leader to his advantage. In the days leading up to Kari's death, Matt had been involved with Vanessa Bull, a woman from his church. The constant communication, the late-night calls, and the secrecy surrounding their relationship all pointed to something far more troubling. What Linda and Bill uncovered wasn't just about a cheating husband. It was about a man who had mastered manipulation to the point where he had even convinced an entire congregation that he was a devout and righteous minister. One of the most damning discoveries came when Bill began to examine Matt's internet history. Bill's search through Matt's online activity revealed alarming and troubling patterns. Among the usual web searches for adult content, Matt's history included chilling queries like how to overdose with sleeping pills and how to obtain Ambien without a prescription. These weren't the typical searches of someone who had an affair. They were the actions of someone preparing for something darker. Matt had been researching methods of taking someone's life, planning meticulously for what he would later execute. His intention wasn't just infidelity, it was a calculated act of murder. The searches painted a disturbing portrait of a man who was planning Kari's death well before that fateful night. The evidence was building. Matt had spent weeks considering how to kill Kari without getting caught, and the method he chose wasn't random. It was deliberate. Linda and Bill's investigation took another crucial turn when they finally managed to convince the authorities to perform an autopsy on Kari's body. Despite the passage of months since Kari's death, the police had accepted the suicide narrative and dismissed any possibility of foul play. Bill, with his expertise and persistence, wasn't about to let the case slip away without the full investigation it deserved. He knew the key to breaking this case wide open was to prove that Kari had not died by her own hand but had been murdered. After months of delays, and after Bill made several formal requests, the authorities reluctantly agreed to conduct an autopsy. 3 months had passed since Kari's death. The autopsy results were, to put it simply, devastating. Though it had been months since Kari's death, the findings revealed something that shattered the initial conclusions made by the authorities. Kari's blood contained no trace of the medications that she had supposedly taken in a suicidal overdose. What was found instead was a key piece of evidence that no one had expected: Unisom, an over-the-counter sleeping pill. This was the same medication that Matt had researched in the days leading up to Kari's death. The autopsy report confirmed that Kari had been drugged with this sleeping medication, but the true shock came when it became clear that Kari had never used Ambien, the drug that Matt had been looking into. This discrepancy, Unisom, not Ambien, pointed to Matt's deliberate actions. He had used an over-the-counter drug to drug Kari, and when she became drowsy, he had likely moved forward with his plan to kill her. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a moment of desperation. This was a calculated act of murder. The investigation had now officially shifted from a possible suicide to cold-blooded murder. The autopsy, combined with the damning evidence from Matt's phone records, internet searches, and his pattern of behavior, made it increasingly clear that Kari had not taken her own life. She had been drugged, and after that, she had been suffocated. But what was most chilling was the realization that Matt had orchestrated this horrific plan long before the night of her death. The man who had been trusted as a minister, a man who had been revered in his community, had committed one of the most heinous acts of betrayal imaginable. Linda and Bill had uncovered a web of lies, and now, with the evidence in hand, they had to ensure that the world knew the truth. But even with everything they had uncovered, there was still one major obstacle to overcome: Matt's defense. In the months following Kari Baker's death, what was initially deemed a tragic suicide soon became the center of a growing web of suspicions. Investigators began to dig deeper into the events surrounding her passing, carefully scrutinizing every detail of the case. Kari's death, which had first appeared to be a heartbreaking and inexplicable tragedy, began to reveal cracks in the official story. And as those cracks widened, what had once seemed like a perfect life, the image of a loving marriage and a grieving husband, began to crumble. Kari's death, while devastating, had not been the result of some tragic accident or final act of despair, as many had assumed. Instead, it became clear that something far darker had been at play. The deeper investigators looked, the more they uncovered about the life that Matt Baker, Kari's husband, had built. A life that had been carefully concealed behind a mask of respectability and faith. Matt Baker, the man who had outwardly appeared to be a devoted husband and father, was now under increasing scrutiny. The seemingly grieving widower, who had been celebrated by his community as a minister and a man of faith, was now the focal point of an investigation that would soon uncover a life filled with secrets, manipulations, and lies. Matt Baker had been the picture of stability and faith. He was a respected minister in the local Baptist church, known for his leadership and seemingly unwavering faith. To the public, Matt had it all: a loving wife, 3 daughters, and a community that looked to him for spiritual guidance. The Baker family was seen as a model of Christian values, and from the outside, their life appeared perfect. But beneath the surface, the reality was far different. Kari, too, had been beloved by the community, a devoted mother, a woman who had experienced great sorrow, yet found strength in her family and faith. But the events leading up to her death began to point to something much more troubling. Kari, a woman who had lost her daughter Cassidy to a tragic illness years earlier, was believed to have taken her own life, overwhelmed by grief. Yet, as investigators soon learned, this wasn't the whole story. The initial investigation into Kari's death was centered around the belief that she had committed suicide. Matt's story to police was that he had found his wife unresponsive in their bedroom after returning home from a late-night errand. He had claimed that, when he found Kari, she was clad only in a t-shirt, lying on the bed with her arms outstretched, and beside her was a suicide note. The note, written in Kari's handwriting, seemed to confirm Matt's version of events, with its somber message about being tired of life and expressing regret over the pain she had caused. It appeared to be a final message from a woman struggling with the pain of losing a child, someone whose grief had become overwhelming. At first glance, the scene seemed tragically self-explanatory, but the details didn't add up. Kari, a woman who had been through unimaginable loss yet kept fighting for her family, was known for her strength. She had worked hard to keep her family together, especially for the sake of her 2 remaining daughters, Kensi and Grace. She had attended counseling and found ways to cope with her grief. To those who knew her, it seemed unlikely that she would have taken her life, especially with her children still in need of her love and care. Something about the scene didn't sit right with Kari's parents, Jim and Linda Julin. Despite the evidence that seemed to support the theory of suicide, they couldn't shake the feeling that Kari would never leave her children behind. The pain of losing Cassidy had been immense, but Linda knew her daughter well. She wasn't the type of person to succumb to despair in this way. Linda and Jim's doubts grew as they began to dig deeper into the events surrounding Kari's death. Their suspicions were heightened by the inconsistent behavior they observed from Matt after Kari's passing. While everyone else was focused on grieving, Matt seemed to be acting strangely detached, almost as though the death had not affected him as it should. He was the center of attention at the funeral, but his reactions, or lack thereof, raised more questions than answers. It wasn't long before Linda learned something that disturbed her even more. She had heard rumors from her sisters, longtime members of Matt's congregation, that Matt wasn't as clean-cut as he appeared. According to the whispers, Matt had made advances toward other women, even while married to Kari. These advances had taken place while he was still serving as a minister, and although many of the women had kept silent to avoid disrupting the family's reputation, the whispers persisted. Linda's suspicions grew as she pieced these stories together. Could it be possible that Matt was hiding something much darker than anyone had realized? The tipping point came when the authorities began to suspect Matt himself. The phone records, the internet searches, the manipulations, and the inconsistencies in his story could no longer be ignored. In September 2007, Matt Baker was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife, Kari. 4 months, he had played the role of the grieving husband, his image in the community polished, his reputation intact as the minister of a local church. But now, the man once seen as a moral leader was under suspicion for something far more shocking. Linda Julin and the prosecution had come a long way in uncovering the truth. But Matt's defense attorney, Guy James Gray, was already preparing for what would become a bitter legal battle. The arrest came as a huge shock to the community, but Matt Baker's defense quickly sprang into action. Guy James Gray, a seasoned criminal defense lawyer, took on the case, confident that he could secure Matt's release. Despite the growing evidence against him, Gray was adamant that Matt had not committed homicide. Gray was known for his ability to defend tough cases, and he was determined to fight back against what he believed were circumstantial and speculative charges. Matt was released on bond shortly after his arrest, a decision that fueled further outrage among those who believed that the case was far from over. As Matt walked free, Linda's frustration mounted. She was still determined to seek justice for her daughter's death. But in a shocking turn of events, just 6 months later, the case was dropped. The prosecutors in charge of the case had determined that the evidence against Matt was speculative, not enough to move forward with a homicide charge. The news hit Linda hard, but her resolve didn't weaken. She knew that something had gone terribly wrong, and she wasn't about to give up on finding the truth. In the wake of the case being dropped, Linda Julin took matters into her own hands. She decided to file a civil lawsuit against Matt Baker, suing him for the wrongful death of her daughter. This bold move would force Matt to testify under oath, an opportunity Linda hoped would provide the final pieces of the puzzle. It would force Matt to take the stand and answer for his actions, something that the criminal justice system had so far failed to compel. As Matt prepared for his deposition, Linda's frustration reached its peak. She had long suspected that Matt's testimony would be key in revealing the truth. But when Matt was questioned about his role in Kari's death, his responses seemed rehearsed, and his emotional detachment was unsettling. One of the most damning aspects of his testimony was when he denied ever having an intimate relationship with Vanessa Bull, the woman whose number had appeared repeatedly in his phone records leading up to Kari's death. Matt's testimony was full of contradictions and inconsistencies. He claimed that when he found Kari unresponsive in their bedroom, he had rushed to dress her with one hand while speaking to the 911 operator on the phone. His description of the events seemed implausible. How could someone dress another person with one hand, especially while trying to revive them? The more Matt spoke, the more holes appeared in his story. He also stated that it took him mere seconds to dress his wife and perform CPR, but this raised further doubts. Photographs taken at the scene revealed that lividity had already set in, meaning that Kari's blood had started settling in her lower body, indicating that she had been dead for much longer than Matt's timeline suggested. These key details didn't add up. As the depositions continued, Matt's defense remained steadfast. His lawyer, Guy James Gray, argued that all the evidence against Matt was circumstantial, and thus couldn't be used to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. According to Gray, there was no definitive proof that Matt had intended to kill Kari. He suggested that Kari's death could have been a tragic accident, a result of her ongoing struggles with depression. He even tried to focus on Kari's history of using sleeping pills to argue that her state of mind had contributed to her death. However, the prosecution would not let the case rest. They worked tirelessly to counter Gray's claims, bringing in crucial witnesses and experts to challenge Matt's version of events. One of the most shocking revelations came when Vanessa Bull, the woman Matt had been in contact with before and after Kari's death, was called to testify. Initially, Vanessa had insisted that she and Matt had only become involved after Kari's death, a claim that the prosecution found difficult to believe. Under intense questioning, Vanessa admitted that she had been seeing Matt while Kari was still alive. She explained that the two of them had formed a relationship after meeting in church, but as the investigation continued, it became clear that their connection went much deeper. Vanessa had been aware of Matt's issues with Kari, and the two had spoken openly about the possibility of Matt's marriage ending. Vanessa even revealed that Matt had confided in her, describing Kari as being emotionally fragile after the loss of their daughter. Vanessa's testimony took a darker turn when she confessed that Matt had told her directly, "I killed her for you." These words were stunning, not only for what they implied but for the chilling clarity they brought to the investigation. According to Vanessa, Matt had told her that Kari's death was a plan, one he had set in motion with cold calculation. He described how he had drugged Kari, making her drowsy with the Ambien he had secretly purchased, and how he had then smothered her while she was unconscious, all while preparing the suicide note to leave behind as the perfect cover-up. Vanessa's story seemed like a confession in itself. She had clearly withheld this information for far too long, but now, under the pressure of the court, her words were damning. Matt had planned everything from the drugging to the stage-managed suicide scene. His intent was clear. He wanted Kari out of the way to pursue his own desires. With Vanessa's testimony now in the hands of the prosecution, the case against Matt Baker became even more concrete. His story was falling apart piece by piece. But even so, Matt continued to deny any involvement in his wife's death. His lawyer tried to push back against the damning evidence, but the weight of Vanessa's confession seemed undeniable. The trial, which had already been intense, now took a dramatic turn. During the trial, evidence emerged that Matt had accessed a website in Japan where he had tried to order Ambien, the very medication he had been searching for in the days leading up to Kari's death. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was yet another piece of the puzzle showing that Matt had planned Kari's death long in advance. As the trial finally drew to a close, all that remained was the deliberation. Linda, her emotions raw but her resolve steely, waited with the prosecution for the jury to return with its verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Would the jury see Matt Baker for what he truly was? A manipulative, deceitful man who had used his position as a trusted spiritual leader to orchestrate the murder of his wife? Or would they find him innocent, based on the circumstantial nature of the evidence? Hours turned into days. Linda sat in the courtroom, anxiously waiting for any sign of movement. After what felt like an eternity, the jury finally returned with their decision. The verdict was read aloud: guilty. Matt Baker was convicted of capital murder. The jury found him responsible for the premeditated death of his wife, Kari Baker, and the sentence was handed down: 65 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 32 years. For Linda and her family, this moment was a bittersweet victory. While they had finally received the justice they had fought so hard for, nothing could bring Kari back. Yet, in the silence of that courtroom, Linda found some semblance of peace, knowing that the man who had betrayed her daughter's trust and caused so much pain was finally being held accountable for his actions. The case of Matt Baker serves as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lie beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. For Linda and her family, the battle for justice had been long and grueling, but in the end, the truth had triumphed. Matt Baker's reign of deceit was over. His guilty verdict solidified the fact that justice had been served. But the scars left by this case would last far longer than any prison sentence ever could. For Linda, the journey had been one of heartbreaking loss, but also one of strength, perseverance, and a refusal to let her daughter's voice be silenced. The trial had ended and the guilty verdict was in. Matt Baker, the man once seen as a pillar of the community, was now behind bars for the premeditated murder of his wife, Kari Baker. For Linda and Jim Julin, the relief was overwhelming, but it didn't come without its share of pain. Kari's death, which had torn apart their family, would never truly be resolved, not in a way that would ever heal the deep wounds that had been left behind. Still, for Linda and Jim, the conviction brought a sense of justice, a sense of closure that they had fought tirelessly for. But there was still something in the air, a lingering question that remained unanswered, one that hovered over the case and the events that led to Kari's tragic death. The grief had not completely faded for Linda and Jim. They had suffered the loss of their daughter, but they had also witnessed her betrayal by the man she had loved and trusted. The complexity of it all left them in a state of perpetual mourning, not just for their daughter but for the life she could have had, for the family they could have been. And while justice had been served, the aftermath of Kari's death was still unfolding. In the aftermath of Matt's conviction, Linda and Jim made a decision that would shape their future. They chose to forgive Matt. Not for him but for themselves. The weight of anger and resentment can hold a person hostage, and Linda knew that holding on to grudges would only weigh them down further. Forgiveness, as difficult as it was, became a part of their healing process. They didn't want the bitterness of the past to continue to affect their lives, to overshadow the memories of Kari's love, her strength, and the joy she had brought to their family. Kari had been a mother, a sister, and a friend. A woman full of life, compassion, and dedication to the people she loved. The fact that she had been taken from them in such a calculated and heartbreaking way was something Linda and Jim would never forget, but they also knew that grief could not consume them. Forgiveness for Linda and Jim wasn't about excusing what Matt had done. It was about reclaiming their peace. They understood that, in order to move forward, they had to let go of the weight of Matt's actions and make peace with the truth. They had long accepted that Kari's passing was preventable, but it had been Matt, the very person who should have protected her, who had set the course of events that led to her death. The responsibility lay with him, and no amount of hatred or anger would bring her back. The legal proceedings had not been easy for Linda and Jim, but there was relief in knowing that Matt Baker's truth was now out in the open. Yet, even with the case closed and the guilty verdict rendered, the emotional impact would linger. Kari's children, Kensi and Grace, had suffered a loss that no child should ever have to face. Their mother had been stolen from them, not just by death, but by a betrayal that would forever affect the way they viewed the man they once called their father. Linda and Jim, determined to give Kensi and Grace the stable, loving environment they needed, took on the responsibility of raising their grandchildren. In the months following the trial, Linda and Jim worked hard to provide a sense of normalcy for their granddaughters, offering them a chance to heal from the trauma they had experienced. Despite the loss of their mother, Kensi and Grace would have the support of their grandparents. Two people who, despite all that had happened, still had the love and strength to be there for them. While Linda and Jim focused on the emotional rebuilding of their family, the rest of the community was left grappling with a more uncomfortable truth. How could such a betrayal have gone unnoticed for so long? How could Matt Baker, a trusted minister and respected member of their church, have been hiding such dark secrets right under their noses? The community that had once revered Matt now found themselves questioning everything they had believed about him. How many others had Matt manipulated? How many people had he deceived with his charm and authority? For some, the truth about Matt Baker left a lingering sense of distrust, not just towards him but towards the institutions that had supported him. In the wake of Kari's death, many began to reconsider the idea of placing blind trust in people, no matter how convincing they seemed. The aftermath of the case also left a void in Kari's life that could never be filled. Her friends, family, and colleagues continued to grieve for the woman she had been and the life she had lost. Kari was a person who had been known for her dedication to her family and her community. She had been a loving mother, a supportive wife, and a faithful friend. The image of Kari Baker, with her laughter and warmth, would remain etched in the hearts of all who knew her. Yet, in the years following Matt's conviction, questions remained. Was the tragedy of Kari Baker's death merely the result of a man driven by selfish desires, or were there deeper forces at play, forces that pushed Matt to take such extreme measures? As the years went by, more and more people began to wonder what had truly motivated Matt to end Kari's life. Was it purely about money or control, or did something else drive him to the point of no return? Theories surrounding the murder continued to circulate. Some speculated that Matt had been driven to kill Kari because of the strain their marriage had endured, particularly after the death of their daughter Cassidy. Others believed that the underlying motive might have been more financial, with the prospect of life insurance or access to Kari's assets being a driving factor. There were also those who believed that Matt had killed Kari for a more personal reason: his desire to start anew with someone else. His affair with Vanessa Bull, the woman with whom he had been in contact so frequently before and after Kari's death, led many to believe that Matt had been planning to build a new life with her. But this theory left people asking, why Kari? Why go to such lengths to kill the mother of his children, a woman who had supported him for so many years? Was it revenge, or was it a calculated move for a new beginning? While the criminal case against Matt was closed, the emotional and psychological scars left behind were far from healed. Linda and Jim may have forgiven Matt, but they knew they could never forget the damage he had caused. The loss of their daughter, Kari, would always haunt them, but in the years after the trial, they found strength in their family. Kensi and Grace, though burdened with the grief of their mother's death, began to show signs of healing, though their journey would take years if not a lifetime. As the community moved on, the lingering questions surrounding Kari's death remained. Theories continued to surface about Matt's motive and the true extent of his manipulations. But no matter what conclusions the community or theorists reached, one thing was clear: Kari's life had been stolen by someone who was supposed to love and protect her. Her legacy as the loving mother and dedicated wife would forever be overshadowed by the betrayal of someone who was supposed to honor those very roles. For Linda and Jim, the finality of the case brought some measure of closure, but the emotional toll would be felt for years to come. The murder of Kari Baker would remain a dark chapter in their family's history, but they had chosen to honor her memory by ensuring that Kensi and Grace would be raised with the love and care that Kari would have wanted for them. The true story of Kari Baker's life, and of her tragic death at the hands of the man she trusted, will remain a stark reminder of the dangers of manipulation, deception, and betrayal. And as the years go by, those who knew Kari will continue to hold her memory close, as they try to make sense of a loss that can never truly be understood. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Bruised Voice. If this case has left you with questions or sparked emotions, don't forget to check out the other fascinating and chilling stories I've covered. I've delved into more true crime cases, each one bringing us closer to understanding the dark realities of the world around us. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free and it ensures you're always in the loop on my latest content. Subscribing means you won't miss out on new updates and true crime stories that I bring to life with each new episode. This is Bruised Voice, and I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe, stay informed, and always remember, the truth can be as unsettling as it is eye-opening.